Welcome back. Nigeria's inflation rate surged to 34.19% in June 2024. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. In its latest report, this increase represents a 0.24% increase, or this report represents a 0.24% increase from the previous month's rate of 33.95%. The Consumer Price Index shows a significant rise in food inflation, which reached a record high of 40.87% in the month of June. Food inflation, 40.87%. The increase in food prices was driven by higher costs of essential items like millet, gari, gari, yam, I must mention that, and groundnut oil. Now, on a month-on-month basis, the headline inflation rate rose by 2.31%, exceeding the previous month's rate of 2.14%. Core inflation also increased by 36 basis points to 27.4% year on year, and this was driven by higher prices for housing, that's rent, rental accommodation, transportation, medical services, and pharmaceutical products. Now, in response to the rising inflation, the federal government of Nigeria has announced, amongst a raft of measures, policy decisions, a 150-day duty-free import window for essential food items, including maize, wheat, rice, and all that. Now, this move aims to achieve food security and economic stability in the country. The Nigerian government has also pledged to collaborate with governments across the country, talking about state governments, to expand the cultivation of land for agriculture across the country. The surge in inflation has put pressure on households across Nigeria, with many Nigerians feeling the pinch of the high prices. The government's efforts to address the issue are seen as a positive step towards mitigating the effects of inflation and, of course, promoting economic growth in Nigeria. Let's talk about this development in the recent report from the NBS. We have joining us virtually two guests. Dr. Ibrahim Osiniwo is an investment and risk expert. He's a member of the All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council. Basil Abia is the co-founder of Veriv Africa. Gentlemen, good evening to you. It's a pleasure having both of you tonight.
Good evening, Kofi. It's a pleasure to be on News Central tonight.
Thank you very much. Dr. Osiniwo, what are the implications, as far as you're concerned, of this soaring inflation rate in Nigeria? It's been going up and up and up and up, and it's showing no signs of coming down.
Good evening, viewers. Thank you for having the show, Kofi. I'm in Nigeria first. I have families, I have friends, I have allies, I have people that I talk to every day. I go to the normal conventional market, and I can feel the pulse of Nigeria. This is not really about the party and the professional force. Nigerians are crying, they are suffering, and the situation is, critical, I must say. The indices and the, inflationary rate alarming, I must say, which I believe my party needs to look into thoroughly. The most crucial thing for anybody, in any country, the most crucial, thing for government to do for a citizen is to provide first food, security, well-being. And as the case is in Nigeria, I challenge the government to look more inward, especially the part of PAP, that things is not really working. Yes, the president is best trying to push in the effect of the inflation, impact of the inflation in the country. I encourage other state governments who do that, especially governors who are not prioritizing people's welfare, to wake up. The citizens find hear their voices. Most governors should kindly go to the market. One of the governors who is trying to provide food, measures, and investing heavily in agriculture is Governor Basil, the former House of Reps member, and the governor of Niger State.
All right.
Doing so well.
Okay.
Inflation is a lot. Can't agree less on that.
Okay, Dr. Osiniwo, using your earpiece, kindly, maybe a Bluetooth device, kindly pull it out, or some sort of earpiece so we can hear you better. So we can hear better. I think it's interfering with quality of the conversation. But I want to go over straight to Basil Abia. Basil, can we conclude that with this upward increase, not just in inflation, but in the rate, in the difference, in the level of increase, it's also going up? The inflation is going up, and the rate of increase is also going up month on month. Can we conclude that the economic policies of the Bola Tinubu administration are not quite working?
Of course, yes. Milton Friedman, quite possibly my favorite macroeconomist of all time, says that the quality of a policy is in its outcome. And it's as simple as that. The outcome of the monetary policy rate hikes by the Central Bank of Nigeria since last year and continue to yield the current high inflation rate, largely due to the fact that productive capacities of our manufacturing sector or the real sector is shrinking due to the lack of access to credit, or the super expensive access to credit, because that's what MPR increases do. And so when you have your food processing plants having to either downsize or reduce production hours, what you have is that production of these finished goods and then the ensuing supply to the markets also reduce. And then, of course, what you have is that there is a spike in price. But we have to also critically analyze what the NBS report from yesterday came from. While the rate of increase month on month is now higher than normal, I remember vividly last week, Cardozo, the CBN governor, was going basically on a congratulatory tour. He was speaking to Bloomberg and saying that, look, month-on-month increase, we have now halted it, and very soon we're going to have the peak of headline inflation. In fact, he didn't only mention, not only did he mention that very soon, he also said that June was going to be the peak of it. Only of course for the NBS inflation report yesterday to bust the bubbles. There are a number of reasons why that rate of increase is spiking up. The first reason, of course, is the food component of the headline inflation. About 51% of our headline inflation is composed of aggregate food prices. So food is spiking up because of the scarcity of a number of staples. I remember carrying out field work just 2-3 weeks ago between Kogi State and then, of course, in Plateau State. And I remember there were reports, first-hand anecdotal reports by farmers and traders on how scarce it was to access yams and potatoes. Obviously, that has changed now since last week. Last week, I was also in Jos, where the new produce had just got into the market. So we're going to see some form of stabilization in terms of these large root and tuber staples in north-central Nigeria. But on aggregate, it's not going to do next to much because, of course, what the consumption basket for Nigeria is predominant on is in the grains. Your maize, your millet, your sorghum, and your wheat. And we only supply about 0.3% of the wheat that we consume. So basically, we import all of the wheat that we consume. I'll have to applaud the current corrective measure by the presidency, which is to do the 150-day temporary halt. But I think it's too late. They should have taken this decision the moment they got into office. But they stalled on it, and I remember every single time I got called on News Central or other television stations, one of the curative or remedial processes or policies I was asking for was a halt in food import.
You've been saying, you said on this program that wheat is an 80% duty. You've been saying in this program, I think you said it last time.
Yes,
that
yes,
wheat is
yes,
still
yes,
there.
Completely agree. I said that, of course, the component of our wheat-based product is very high in what households consume. They love their Indomie, they love their bread. Every single Nigerian eats bread. Most of the artisans and menial workers, that's what they like to have for their breakfast. In Lagos, it's a staple for breakfast. Bread or what they call ewa agboyin, combination of the beans, meal, and then of course the bread. And it's really inaccessible now even for
but Basil, please, permit me to bring back Dr. Osiniwo. to this conversation. Basil has said, it's clear that the economic policies of the President Bola Tinubu administration seem not to be working, looking at the results that we are seeing. Dr. Osiniwo, are you of that view?
Absolutely not. I'm a student of macroeconomic policy and, policy economy to be precise. It's easy for you to digest textbook, working in, corporate, offices where things are well structured, where risk management analysis is at probably below equilibrium. You can easily measure all those factors and apply macroeconomic policies and indices on governance. Governance is absolutely a different ballgame. However, I've been one of the first, risk auditor of a major bank, if you could remember, Bond Bank, and I moved from there to Prudent Bank. I'm sure anybody in the streets will know those banks during those days. So if you are measuring, governance, risk analysis and economic, indices to measure inflation, governance with the one in corporate offices, they are absolutely on a good pathway. Now, if it's going to be, it's not going to be fair for you to say the impact of any economic policies, the results that will give you the final analysis. We are talking about agriculture here. We're talking about, agriculture here. We're talking about other sectors where the president and the policies of this government, has been well established. For instance, food inflation across Africa is not pertaining to Nigeria. Mind you, I'm a Nigerian. I'm not defending or speaking for the government that there is no food crisis. The inflation rate that we have is not existent. But I'm telling you that it will be sad for you to measure, the general policy or to throw in the garbage the general policy of this administration based on few indices of macroeconomic policies. In oil and gas sector, what are we doing? In infrastructure, what are we doing? In other policies, health management services, what are we doing?
So you're saying that despite the result as published by the NBS, the economic policies of the Tinubu administration are working?
So, excuse me, please.
You're saying that despite the results as published by the National Bureau of Statistics, that shows inflation is still going up, and you're saying that despite all of this, the economic policies of the Bola Tinubu administration are working.
Kofi, please, can you check the inflation rate and indices in the United States?
No, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to get your point. Are you saying that the policies are working?
Let me call your attention.
No, Dr. Osiniwo, I just want to. I want to understand. Are you saying the policies are working? I want to establish that.
Policies are working, of course, because we have food crisis. We have, deflated inflation does not mean that the policy of the government is not working. That is what I'm trying to tell you. Yes, there is. For instance, look at Kenya for God's sake. The inflationary rate, even the tax regime in Kenya, is at above equilibrium. Food, no security.
I'm not asking you if other countries are also having economic problems. I'm saying, are the economic policies of the Bola Tinubu administration yielding result?
Absolutely. Economic policy is not a jamboree. It's not a spiritual, concurrent. It takes time. My dear friend and brother there, he should know that economic policy is not a day. It's not something you propound today and next tomorrow it comes to life. He should know that those are the basis of macroeconomic policies. Those are the things they will teach you to know that economic policy takes time because it's not a rocket science. It's not a magic.
Okay, let me allow Basil Abia. But Basil Abia, what's your response? Because he's mentioned your name.
So my response is basically to use statistics and data. This time last year, Ghana were hovering about 33% headline inflation. Ghana has further reduced their inflation rate to about 24%. And 24%, just under 24% was our headline inflation rate last year when President Bola Tinubu took over. And now headline inflation in Nigeria is 34.19%. So it's like a reverse order. Tinubu takes over, it spikes up. In Ghana, over that same duration. They nearly half it to over 24%. In Kenya, it was hovering around 10% this time last year. As I'm talking to you right now, you can even check on the internet, it's about 6.3% headline inflation, regardless of the fact that they've had close to 6 weeks of nationwide protests and upheaval. Inflation rate is single digit. The last time Nigeria had single digit inflation was when the PDP went government in 2015, the last month of erstwhile President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. So since the APC have taken over governance in Nigeria, till date, they have not registered single-digit headline inflation or single-digit food inflation for Nigeria and Nigerians. That's just the truth. In the US, you were mentioning about the headline inflation rates in the US. The headline inflation rate in the US is about 2.7%, the United States of America. Yes, they had their own troubles last year, but they have been able to curtail it using a number of policy tools. And that takes me back to my quotation of the American macroeconomic legend, Milton Friedman. The quality of a policy is in its outcome. It's as simple as that. I did philosophy from my first degree as one of my elective courses, a number of it, of course. And one of the courses I was taught consequentialism, basically, that the best way to make decisions, first and foremost, are to look at what potential consequences are there. This government has been in government for close to 13 months, and consequences basically of their governance is that aggregate prices across board goods and services continue to spike. People are feeling the pinch. Things are not well. We have to say the truth.
Okay, so you're saying the government has rather made things worse?
Yes, they've made things worse based on inactions and then, of course, late reaction. The first late reaction was the fact that they kept quiet and did not do anything about the food imports price transmission. Food imports tariffs price transmission is significant. How can you not have self-sufficiency in wheat and then slam an 80% tariff rate on wheat importation? You are never going to, even if you bring the best agricultural science methods,
you talked about the inactions.
You're never going to meet those demand levels.
But
because we're not a traditional wheat producing
you talked about the inactions. You talked about the inactions of the government. You talked about the delayed actions. What about the actions? Are there any actions that the Bola Tinubu administration has taken that has made the situation worse, like you're saying, it's getting worse?
Yes, first and foremost, the central bank administration that he got, they have been stubborn with their continuous hiking of MPR, and their logic and the logic of a lot of other economists and analysts who are supporting the hikes is that the concurrent increase in interest rates would be able to draw FDI, which will now reduce and stabilize the FX market. Right. And by thus doing, if you stabilize the FX market, right, you are going to reduce exchange rate pass-through.
So that is one of the things that, so it's not just, sorry to interrupt you, so it's not just inactions and delays, but also actions. Dr. Osiniwo, it could be argued, because Basil is saying that the Bola Tinubu administration's policies have made it worse, that the results are staring us in the face. But maybe you are coming up with alternative facts. For instance, Nigeria's inflation rate today, 34.19%, is the highest inflation rate since 1996, when Nigeria was a pariah nation, when the world placed sanctions on Nigeria. Even the president couldn't travel. Even our own Super Eagles could not participate in Nations Cup. That was when we had it this bad. Sir, last March 2024, a 2.5 kilogram bucket of Irish potato was selling for 5,000 naira. It's now selling for 7,800 naira, 56% increase. Abuja yam, 5 pieces, as published in today's Guardian, was selling for 10,000 naira in March. It's now selling for 22,000 naira. That's 120% increase. And Nasima is saying that the inflation is not even 30-something percent. It's 90%. That's their view. So are you presenting alternative facts? Are you refusing to see the results in front of you?
KB, good for me. I schooled here in Nigeria and I studied very, extensively in the United Kingdom. So no no artificial theory or textbook indices can, really bother people like us. I was in Turkey recently. Do you know the inflation, rate in Turkey as of today, basically this month? A member of the leading European Union states and, one of the prominent countries in one of the Arab nations. Now, let me come back to Nigeria. I can understand where my dear friend is coming from. I understand that things is not well shaped. The theory, the present economic theory and, policies, is not in tandem with what, Nigerians are actually.
But you're still saying that the policies are working. Dr. Osiniwo, we have to leave it at that. You're still saying the policies are working.
You need to allow me to talk.
We've run out of time. I'm sorry. I've been prompted that we have to go.
You are giving more time than me.
No, sir. Balance. You spoke for a while before you did. I'm sorry, Dr. Ibrahim Osiniwo. Please bear with us. We have to leave it at that. That's the size of our package. And of course, we'll say big thank you to Dr. Ibrahim Osiniwo, who's an investment and risk expert and former member of the APC Presidential Campaign Council, and Basil, Abia, co-founder of Very Africa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.